Yesterday, I discussed day one of Big Ten Media Days, and today, obviously, we are discussing day two. Before we get into this episode, I want to thank you guys for 6,000 subscribers. If you would have told me exactly a year ago that at this time I would have 6,000 dedicated subscribers, I wouldn't have known what to say. And I also want to thank you guys for the high engagement on the video about day one of the Big Ten Media Days. You all are on average watching that video for 11 full minutes, despite the fact that you all are only a fan of one Big Ten team, or maybe no Big Ten teams, and you're just looking at my insight on Big Ten Media Days. Just wanted to shout you all out and thank you for those two things. I found that day two, outside of the Ohio State side of things, because that was very entertaining and just full of content, I found that everything else was a little simpler, a little more boring, and maybe that's because day one you had Michigan, you had Nebraska, you had Minnesota, three teams that I'm intrigued by and I think will do well. Pat Fitzgerald is always entertaining to listen to, so maybe I just gemmed better with the audience, the Tuesday audience, instead of Wednesday's audience. But we're going to be talking about day two, and I'm going to spend about 3 to 4 minutes per team like I did in the most recent video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you're on the YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like this video, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on Big Ten Media Days down below. Let's start off with Illinois and Brett Bielema. They're picked to finish 6th in the West Division, and the entire speech to me just showed that Brett is, well, call it what it is. He's a veteran. He's been in the Big Ten for, in counting all of his experience, more than a decade, more than 2 decades. Don't exactly remember, but he played at Iowa under Hayden Fry. He was an assistant at Wisconsin before taking over as their head coach, where he won 3 Big Ten championships, then went to Arkansas, didn't work out there, was fired, went to the NFL, and now is back here at Illinois. And you can see the veteran presence, and you can hear it in his speech, what he said. He talked about how it was back in his day going to the Big Ten Media Day and all of that stuff. And you could also see it in his team last year. The 5-7 team that lost to UTSA and got blown out by Virginia, but then stunned Penn State and Minnesota on those two teams' own home fields. Like, Illinois is this team that is just, they're solid. You can't overlook them. And that's basically what it is. Strong trench play. Love to run the football with Chase Brown, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. They're last in the Big Ten in returning production, 103rd in the FBS specifically. But Brett Bielema, he inherited a pretty bad football team that Lovie Smith ruined, and in 2021 he nearly got them to above 500 in conference play. It's pretty fantastic. He thinks his team is tough, smart, dedicated, and he thinks that those things not only describe his team, but they're ingrained in his team's DNA. So he's working through the team, building his culture, his identity in that team. He also says that an extra preseason with his team allows him to know his roster better and what they can and can't do. And he said that specifically. He knows better what his team can and cannot do, and that is so important. I don't think Illinois is going to be a successful team this year. I have them going 4-8, but I love the direction that they're going, and I think that Brett Bielema, I think that this is going to, that under Brett Bielema, Illinois is going to be a competitive team. They're going to be a team that no one can overlook because they're just going to play solid, fundamental football. Up next, we have Rutgers, picked to finish 6th in the East Division. And first thing out of Schiano's speech that I gathered is his opening speech, not the questions, but he's a very big fan of special teams. He praised Adam Korsak as the best punter that he's known in 35 years of coaching, which is huge. like Schiano said. He said he's the most interesting punter, most interesting guy, I think, specifically, that he knows on the team, to which Adam Korsak responded that isn't true, that he actually isn't that interesting. He just golfs and does other things, which I found to be pretty funny. Rutgers went 5-8, 2-7 in conference last year. That 8th loss looks weird with 5 wins, but that's because Rutgers, due to academic progress, was invited to the Gator Bowl to replace Texas A&M, who opted out due to COVID concerns. Schiano and Rutgers, what they are is good special teams, solid defense. They're sort of like the Iowa of the Big Ten East. The problem there, of course, is what do Iowa and Rutgers also have in common? Poor QB play. Luckily for Rutgers, there's a competition going on, and I actually have more faith in Noah Vedral and Gavin Wimsatt, the latter a 4-star out of high school, to do better than Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla. With Schiano bringing in several offensive linemen through the transfer portal, with Taj Harris coming in from Syracuse, a good wide receiver there, Rutgers' offense has a chance to open up and be better than it was last year. Noah Vedral, as Coach Schiano said, is a competitor. Gavin Wimsatt is talent. And so I kind of, as a Michigan fan, draw the comparison of Noah Vedral's the known, he's a leader, he's a competitor, but his ceiling is lower than Gavin Wimsatt in the similar way that Cade McNamara's ceiling is lower than J.J. McCarthy. But just because someone has more raw ability doesn't mean you just go with them. And by raw ability, I mean raw talent, because the mental game, the leadership game is important too. And that's an area where, like how I think Cade McNamara is the better leader currently than J.J. McCarthy and knows the game better and has that veteran component. I think that Noah Vedral, the way Schiano just talks about him, he's a leader, he's a competitor, he's a fighter. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins that open quarterback competition. And I think there's a sense of just togetherness with Rutgers and Greg Schiano. Schiano said that installing his culture at Rutgers and also establishing little things, he didn't go into detail, but he said establishing many little things and his culture at Rutgers has been important, and he feels like he has finally done that. So maybe everything's coming together for Rutgers to do something big. I don't think that'll happen this year. I think 4-8, 5-7, maybe 6-6 can happen, but 6-6 with what Rutgers has would be huge, if we're being honest here. Up next, we got Penn State and James Franklin, whose speech I don't really think said much of anything. Was it partially entertaining? Yes, you heard him talk about PJ Mustipher and how much of an impressive eater he is. How he ate a bunch of mashed potatoes, a big steak, ordered 2 lobster, and a ton of shrimp. And that's impressive. And that, plus the fact he's a very good defensive tackle, just kidding, it's just the part that he's a really good defensive tackle is why he's on my first team all Big Ten defense, and I think he's going to be one of the main leaders and key players to a Penn State defense that James Franklin seems to have confidence in. When asked about the departure of Arnold Ebiketie and other good edge rushers, he didn't seem concerned at all. He just shrugged it off, and I think that to a certain degree he has the right to do so. I mean, he bringing in a transfer from Maryland. Penn State recruits well at that position. They develop well at that position. I think they returned their defensive line coach. Maybe I could be wrong. He mentioned concerns at linebacker, but at safety, you have Jair Brown and others there as well. You have Joey Porter Jr. at corner. So Penn State's defense overall, outside of linebacker, is pretty set. Obviously, the offense is an area of concern. James Franklin, mainly in that regard, talked about deep running back room, talked about the offensive line and how that's the topic every year that's brought up, and how he thinks that, well, he gave them a vote of confidence, but seeing that Phil Trautwein is still the O-line coach, I don't know if I would go that far. Penn State, anyways, picked to finish 3rd in the East Division, and I have them there too, but I don't have them there because they're great. I think that their schedule and my own predictions allow them to finish third there. I have them going 7-5, 5-4 in conference this season. I think that this season for James Franklin and Penn State is a season where you have to survive, go out with some momentum, and then in 2023, when you don't lose as much production in that preseason, Penn State lost so much to the NFL this year, then maybe in 2023 you can do some damage. You can get a double-digit win season again. And Franklin is clearly excited about college football's future, mentioning how he's proud of the relationships with players and the changes that are occurring in college football. Mentioned NIL a little bit, talked about Sean Clifford and his involvement there too. So Penn State, a lot of questions, some unknowns, and Franklin I didn't think he said a whole lot of much in his speech compared to the other coaches, if I'm being quite honest with you. And Wisconsin, a team that is picked to finish first in the West they were picked that in 2020, 2021. The problem is they haven't won it since 2019, when they were actually picked to be the runner-up or the third-place team in the West. Nebraska was picked first that year, and Wisconsin came seemingly out of nowhere with Jonathan Taylor and Jack Cohn and won the West. And that by far, I think, was Wisconsin's best offense in the Paul Chryst era. Wisconsin's picked to finish first in the West again. Paul Chryst is also a clean, simple, no-nonsense kind of guy. And that's what his speech was. I think last year at Media Days, Paul Chryst said the goal of football, of course, is to just to score more than your opponent does, or something like that. Like, he just likes to be simple, just says what needs to be said. And I think that Wisconsin functions best when they're a clean, simple, no-nonsense program. And last year, the offense was nonsense. Having Graham Mertz, who had a 9-10 TD-INT ratio, who regressed from his already poor 2020 play, it was not good. And if not for Braylon Allen being there, Wisconsin probably wouldn't have finished 9-4. Not probably, they would have definitely not finished 9-4, seeing that Ches Malusi was injured in the middle of the year. I think Bobby Ingram is likely the right hire. Paul Chryst praising him, and unlike Scott Frost, who, is trying to quote-unquote collaborate with Mark Whipple, which tells you that he has the final say on all play-calling matters, Paul Chryst is giving up that responsibility. And all power to him. That takes a lot of courage, that takes humility, and those two are great qualities in a head coach. Great qualities. And Bobby Ingram, no, I don't think he's been a coordinator before, but it's a different mindset. He's been in the NFL. This stuff works out before. And with Braylon Allen, the offensive line that he has, and just those two things alone mean that Ingram has a lot to work with on the ground. And if Mertz just becomes average, then he actually has a pass game to work with Mertz and Kymir Dyke and others at the receiver and tight end position. So I think that it's the right hire. I made a whole video on that a few months ago, but I'm pretty confident now that it's the right hire. We'll see how well they do this season. And I think they're going to go, their schedule's tough. They have to play at Ohio State, at Michigan State. And because of that, and the fact that I don't really have faith in Graham Mertz, and they lose a whole lot on defense, I have them going 8-4. But their defense seems to reload year in, year out. And if Mertz improves, and Paul Chryst praised Mertz and said he has improved, which you can't exactly tell if that's true or not, but if he has, Wisconsin can win the West. Wisconsin is the O-line, the run game, the defensive coordinator in Jim Leonard, and the defensive structure overall to win their division. It's just a matter of really the offense and the quarterback position. We have Purdue, and Purdue I like them. And I like them because of how different they are compared to the rest of their division. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, teams that they're more defensively oriented, or if they aren't, like to run the football, control the game. And what does Purdue do? Oh, just air it out. Look at their game against Michigan State last year. They didn't run the football and chew clock. They passed the ball and chewed clock. They've returned to the Joe Tiller era of basketball on grass. They have Aiden O'Connell returning. They have Payne Durham returning. They have a lot of their offensive line returning. They brought in Tyrone Tracy and Charlie Jones from Iowa, 2 wide receivers via the portal to replace David Bell and Jackson Anthrop. There's reason for Jeff Brom to be confident in his wide receiver room. And I don't know if Brom has said this before, because I haven't watched all of his media day performances, but he seems to recognize that his team, despite the losses, they actually have the capability to place first in their own division. You have the X-Factor quarterback, who in the second half of the year was fantastic. You can seemingly reload at wide receiver. This has been proven with Rondale Moore and David Bell. And you return a lot of your starters, both on offense and on defense. The defense was 23rd last year in red zone performance. And I just think Purdue is a team that's going to surprise again. Now, I don't have them winning the West. I have Nebraska winning the West. And if Nebraska doesn't win it, I think Minnesota wins it. And if those two don't win it, then I have Purdue winning it. I think Purdue finishes third in the West, and I think they go 9-3. So 11-9 win regular season, 1 win improvement off of last year where they went 8-4. But I genuinely think they're set to surprise people again. They're picked to finish 4th in their own division, and they're picked behind, the usuals in Wisconsin and Iowa. Minnesota's ahead of them, and then behind them are Nebraska at 5th, Illinois at 6th, and Northwestern at 7th. They have everything, really. The question just is sort of their run game in a certain sense, because Jeff Brom, like he said, at some point you do have to run the football. And another question is there an X-Factor wide receiver? And what can they do with Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy, 2 of Iowa's more talented wide receivers who got sick of what Iowa was doing on offense, more likely than not, and came over to Purdue, where Purdue utilizes and actually develops wide receivers. So I'm curious to see what Purdue can do. They open up against Penn State, and I think that will say a lot about both teams, but I think that Purdue is going to go out and they're going to win that game because I think they have the better head coach, and I think that they'll have the better offense. And I don't know if it's a night game or not, but I don't think it's a noon game. Anyway, if it is, the fan support, like Jeff Brom said, has been amazing. Purdue football is overall heading in a great direction. Up next, we got Mel Tucker. Mel and the Michigan State Spartans shocked everyone last year. Now, Mel Tucker's speech, like a lot of these speeches, there isn't a whole lot to talk about. It was pretty simple, no nonsense. He quickly answered questions and just put them to sleep. But I like talking about Michigan State in general, so maybe I'll run a few extra minutes with them. Michigan State, what they did last year was fantastic. It was, truly awe-inspiring when they beat my Michigan Wolverines. There are several memes and GIFs and different things that can totally describe my reaction to that game. None of them with a smile on their face, and if it is a smile, it was before the screaming ensued. Anyway, what they did last year was fantastic, and there is totally a chance that they can do it again. And Mel Tucker sees it. I think the media sees it to a certain degree, but they're picked to finish 4th in the East, and that just, it's like Michigan being picked 2nd in the East. Yeah, you're respected, you're given attention, but you're not picked first. And if you're not picked first, you can always use that for locker room material, for motivation. And Mel Tucker's teams, whether they've been at Colorado or the 2020 Michigan State team or his Georgia defenses, there's one thing about them. They never, never give up. They never give up unless the game is truly, truly out of reach. Hence 2021 OSU. They never, ever give up. The mindset and the culture that he instills it's amazing. It is something that I very much admire. He is a player's coach. He's a culture guy. He knows how to recruit, knows how to scout talent. The overall direction of Michigan State football is great. It's fantastic. It might even be heading toward an elite direction. And I think it was reflected in the press conference. Very confident. He was oozing charisma and toughness the entire time. It was good. I liked it. He's confident in his team and their goals. Now, me and what I see with Michigan State is, no, I don't think they can place first and win all of their games. I don't think they have the depth to do it. I don't think that they have the O-line or secondary to do it. And I think that there are other questions that have to be asked because last year was just so amazing that it's going to be hard to repeat it again without more 4 and 5 stars on the roster and more better players and a few extra years to instill everything. But honestly, I liked his press conference. And I liked what he said at media days. He's confident in his team. He discarded last year's record, not the success, because he said it was amazing, praised it, but no entitlement from the Spartans. They are not high off of last year's success, which is something you don't want because let's face it, media is recognizing him, and media recognition can be absolute toxicity to teams. Look at the Michigan Wolverines. I'd say look at Ohio State at points last year where it looked like they weren't giving all of their A effort. Michigan State with Mel Tucker, you never have to worry about that. His teams will not give up. They will never not put in their effort. And he's confident in his team and their goals. I have them going 8-4. And they can go 9-3. They can even go 10-2. I don't think they can win all their games. And I think it's unlikely they'll bring a championship to East Lansing, but look what they did last year when most thought they'd have a losing record, and they went 11-2. So who's to say Mel Tucker can't do it? Who's to say that he can't bring a championship to East Lansing this year? That echoed throughout every word he said, and that's why I, if you remove the fact that I'm a Michigan fan from the equation, like him so much. And to talk about another team that I, as a Michigan fan, because they're a rival, not a fan of, the Ohio State Buckeyes. But if you remove my fandom from my heart, I like their head coach, and I like the direction of their program once again. Ohio State is rightfully picked to finish first in the East Division. They're unanimously picked to win their division. They're unanimously picked to win the conference. And Ryan Day isn't letting it get to his players' heads. Not at all. He's not doing it. There are clear goals that are being set, much like with Michigan, their main rival. As Ryan Day said, beat Michigan. He used different words, but I'm not going to use those. Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. And then he echoed how those things didn't happen last year. And how an 11-2 season with the Rose Bowl win is considered good for a lot of schools, like Michigan State, for example. Michigan, I would say, an 11-2 season this year with a Rose Bowl win, I'd be a little iffy about it because how easy our schedule is, and it'd be concerning to lose 2 games with that schedule. But 11 wins with a Rose Bowl win, I'd be okay or above average or good feeling about it. Not at Ohio State. That's a failure, and Ryan Day sees that. He's been consistent with that message since day one, citing his introductory press conference after Ryan Day retired, and he knows. He knows what's going on. He even said in regards to, the expectations of playing winning football that he expects a top 10 defense. A top 10 defense this season in Jim Knowles' first year. Now, granted, Jim Knowles has a lot of talent to work with, has a lot of great assistant coaches to work with, but still jumping from the defense that Ohio State had last season to a top 10 unit, pretty high expectation. The Buckeyes can totally, and I mean it when I say this, they can totally have that. We'll just have to see and let the games play out for themselves. Last season, another concern for the Buckeyes was maturity. They lacked leadership at points. They lacked giving their A-plus effort. And you saw that on the field, and I read an article somewhere that stated that Kevin Wilson, offensive coordinator and I think tight ends coach for the Buckeyes, pointed it out as a weakness in the 2021 preseason. The youth of the team, the lack of leadership in certain instances. You saw it early on with Ohio State last season, against Minnesota at times on defense, against Oregon, both on offense and defense, against Tulsa. And from there, Ohio State improved. Looked like everything was fixed. Then the Penn State game happened. And sure, it made sense. Penn State always plays Ohio State close. And then the Nebraska game happened. And in those two games, yes, I didn't think that, my Wolverines had any chance to beat Ohio State at that point. But I realized that, wait, this Ohio State team has not fixed the issues it started out with. They haven't at all. They've fixed them to a degree. They've put Band-Aids on some things, but they haven't fully healed the wound. They just haven't. And it was apparent all throughout last season. And then the Michigan-Ohio State game hit, and you just realized that, yeah, because that's really all they could do, they put Band-Aids on a bullet wound. And the Band-Aid and the limb that the Band-Aid was holding together fell off in the Michigan game. Then they went out, won the Rose Bowl. That Rose Bowl game, it was so important that they won that game. It showed that they had mental toughness, that they could put an A-plus effort. It showed that they have a good coach who's just set for the team, who's tough, who's resilient, who can instill his culture. That Rose Bowl win was so important. Imagine if they went out on a Rose Bowl loss, lose in demoralizing fashion to Michigan, lose in demoralizing fashion to Utah. That sets a completely different feel to a certain extent surrounding the program than winning the Rose Bowl in an epic comeback fashion, when at times it felt like everyone and every power it be was just, against Ohio State. Like the 4th and 1 play where Cameron Rising just breaks tons of tackles and gets to the end zone, or when Britton Covey returns a touchdown for 6, and all that offensive explosiveness in that game. So Day's impressed with the team's maturity. The theme for Ohio State this year, I think, is revenge. I've said that from day one of trying to analyze and predict this 2022 Ohio State team. And for that reason, plus what they return with C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Trevion Henderson, what they return there, the fact that they return the most of their defense, including lead tackler Ronnie Hickman, and all these things, adding Jim Knowles to the staff, adding Justin Fry to the staff to improve the O-line, which Ryan Day said he thinks he's done a good job there, wants to run the football more, get more physical. All of these things combined, plus the fact that they host Michigan this year, which definitely played a factor in who won last year. That home field advantage for Michigan was something else, just like it was something else for Ohio State in 2016 and 2018. And I think that all those things combined, Ohio State goes 12-0 in the regular season. They're going to be that much better than almost every team, if not every team that they face. They're going to win the Big Ten Championship Game 2, go 13-0, and I have them winning it all. I have them going 15-0 and winning the national championship. So that's it. That's day 2. Those are my thoughts on day 2 of the Big Ten Media Days. Thank you all for watching. If you're new to this channel and are interested in Big Ten football, college football, Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska, Michigan State football, anything relating to college football and especially Big Ten football, make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, hit that notification bell so you can get notified when I post content. That's so important. And comment your thoughts on this video down below if you're on the YouTube. And if you're on the Spotify, make sure to follow the channel. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys around. Bye.